This is going to be one where we're probably going to get in trouble, probably going to make some people mad, because we're going to talk about a topic that every time it's come up in passing, it's made people mad. Honestly, guys, this is probably the topic that has made pastors the maddest at us. That it's made pastors madder than NDAs. It's made pastors madder than when we talked about plagiarism. And it's a system. All it is a church system that we have almost idolized. All right, guys, welcome back to the Church Disrupted podcast with your host, Jeff Cochran. And today I'm joined by co-host Abby Fleming and Buck Fleming. It's been a while since we've been able to actually do a podcast together. So welcome back, guys. Glad to have you guys on the podcast today.
Hey.
This is going to be one where we're probably going to get in trouble, probably going to make some people mad, because we're going to talk about a topic that every time it's come up in passing, it's made people mad. Every time it's come up in passing, we've had a viral or semi-viral clip. Every time it's come up in passing, we've had pastors who really show their rear, not the fruit of the Spirit, just their backside on social media. So if you're a pastor and you're getting mad, I really hope as you're responding on social media that you watch the full episode and not just the clips, because if you show your rear, it's going to be the same thing again. But honestly, guys, this is probably the topic that has made pastors the maddest at us. That it's made pastors madder than NDAs. Mm-hmm. It's made pastors madder than when we talked about plagiarism. And it's a system. All it is a church system that we have almost idolized in a lot of circles of the church. And there are churches that are a part of this network that use this system, right? They run this playbook like verbatim. There are also churches that aren't a part of this network that basically plagiarize different versions of this system. But it's everywhere right now in the American evangelical church, okay? So even if your church is not a part of this network, your church is not running this system, you may see similarities to things that your churches do to what we're talking about today. But we talked about the last episode I think that we did together, the three of us, was narcissistic church systems. And it was one of our more listened to episodes. I think it was top 10 on downloads for the first 50 episodes. But we talked about narcissistic, not people, not behaviors, but narcissistic systems in churches. And how we described narcissistic systems was we said those are systems that are insular. They're about the church. They're about growing the church reputation, the church building, the church organization, more so than they are about reaching people in their community just for the sake of the gospel, and more so than they are about helping people grow and be discipled, okay? And when you look back, we were talking about this before we hit record, but I'm doing a lot of church history deep dives right now, having to unlearn a huge majority of what I was taught about church history in seminary. So you guys buckle up. We got some stuff coming on that it's gonna bother all of us, okay? Because it's just wrecking me, okay? But as we go back and we look at early church history, there was no idea of let me grow my gathering. Nobody thought about let me grow my gathering. Nobody thought about how good can I look? What's the reputation of my gathering in my house versus somebody else's? Nobody would even say that they go to church. The phrase go to church would have been foreign to them, right? Because everybody was a part of the same church, just different gatherings. And nobody was leading the early gatherings. And people will say, no, Jeff, the apostles were leading the early church. And yes, the apostles were leading the early church. They weren't leading the individual gatherings.
Right.
Day one of the church, how many people were saved? You remember?
If you're considering Pentecost day one, 3,000 people were added to the people that were already gathered. So,
just a couple of days in, we had about 5,000. It continued to grow. There were 11 apostles, and then when they brought in Matthias, there were 12. Paul was a long way from being on the scene. Paul was closer to murdering Christians at that point than not. Okay, so do we think that the 12 apostles were leading all these gatherings? No.
And I think that the election of Matthias might be one of the first times that we actually see the early church take church leadership into their own hands, because instead of waiting for the Spirit or praying about it, they cast lots.
That's right.
So they went back to their old systems and started casting lots to see who would be who would replace Judas. And to me, I find that interesting because they took it into their own hands, believing that that apostle had to be replaced at that time. And so, I mean, we don't see anything past that about Matthias really at all.
Just kind of disappears from
He
history.
just kind of
after that.
disappears. So we don't have a good record or a bad record. But I just when I've read that in the past, I'm like, was this really them being led by the Spirit, or was this them trying to implement an existing system and an existing structure into a new creation, which was the early church?
Yeah. And it's a good question. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say, right? But it is a good question because, what happens just a little bit later, you give it time, and God actually replaced that apostle in Paul, right? In his own way and in his own time. But the bottom line is, if you go back and you go back to church history, I don't want to get too detailed in this, but when you go back to the first century, you go back to what the Bible teaches, look at what it teaches about our gatherings, because people confuse, okay? I'm going to say this really quickly, not get into the details on this, but people will say, no, there were 3,000 people. We're going to talk about megachurch, a system that started in a megachurch today, and it's a megachurch that likes to teach other people to use this system to stay big and stay mega, okay? But every time we talk about something difficult with the megachurch, or we say, hey, we got to watch out for this in megachurches, or we say, hey, has the megachurch movement caused an issue? We have people who come back and go, oh, come off it, man. Megachurches have been around since the church started. There was a megachurch day one. There were 3,000 people day one at Pentecost, but those 3,000 people met in homes. They gathered in homes daily. But then you'll have people who come back and go, no, they didn't. They met every day in the temple courts. Well, why did they meet every day in the temple courts? Because every Jew met every day in the temple courts, or if they were outside of Jerusalem in the synagogue. Why? Because you met multiple times a day to pray. And when they went to the temple courts, they would have been arrested or killed, right, for having their own worship service, for taking over someone else's temple. Instead, that was when they were going and praying and evangelizing as they started talking to other Jews about Jesus, about the Messiah. So we equate the temple with the church, which it was not. But when we go to Scripture and we just say, hey, what does Scripture describe about the closest thing to a church service? And it was not a church service. It was the gathering of believers. It describes everybody had a role and no one was in charge of the gathering. Were there elders? Yes. Were there overseers? Yes. When we look deep into that, that's going to blow people's mind too, because they were not in every gathering. Right? They were overseeing the church universal, the church in cities. They were not in every gathering, right? But we've come so far to this idea with narcissistic systems, right? And this is where we came to the idea for today's episode. Narcissistic systems are so much about growing my church, my reputation, my brand, that we have forgotten that it's no one's church, it's no one's brand, it's no one's building, it's no one's method. We all have a role to play. What was our call from Jesus? One of the last things he told us to do, go and make disciples of all peoples, right? And when we're not careful, narcissistic systems trade making disciples for growing organizations, right? So this is one of the narcissistic systems we talked about in that episode. We didn't have time to do a deep dive. We talked about it in a couple of other episodes, and every time we do, people say, hey, I think you're being too hard. So we're going to do a breakdown today. We're going to talk about Growth Track. Why are we against Growth Track? And we're not saying Growth Track's evil. I'm not saying Growth Track's evil. I'm not going to put words in y'all's mouth. I'm not saying Growth Track is evil. I'm not saying Growth Track is always bad. But I am saying that Growth Track is a narcissistic system. It was created as a narcissistic system, and I've seen it do a lot of damage. What I am also saying, even though I'm not saying that Growth Track is always bad and damaging, it always can be, I am saying that Growth Track is 100% off of the early church model that we were given, okay? This is a grow my church model. And guys, when I say this, we're going to look at the Growth Track book as put out by Church of the Highlands, who made this, and now through ARC, the Association of Related Churches, they share this with churches all over the country. It's their assimilation system. It's how you take brand new people and get them into the machine, because we have to have volunteers doing ministry in the machine, and you have to constantly have more volunteers, right? But ARC is also known for, ran by Church of the Highlands. It's an association and convention of Church of the Highlands, okay? Instead of just telling people use this to assimilate people into your church, they use it as a part of a strategy called start big, stay big. Mm-hmm. Start really big, stay really big, and you will always need more and more volunteers to grow. You'll never have enough volunteers in this system. And when I say that, guys, we're going to look at the actual Growth Track book provided by Church of the Highlands. But I have also been in the rooms where church leaders, including the ones who created this, talk about it. Okay, I've been in these rooms enough. I've heard the way they talk about it behind closed doors. And behind closed doors, there's not a lot of talk about discipleship. There's not a lot of talk about growing people. There's not a lot of talk about community. The talk is church leader to church leader. This will fix your problems. This will make sure you have enough volunteers. This will always make sure that the new people who are coming in will start serving and giving. Okay, so this is about, when they talk about it behind closed doors, I've heard it most often talked about with what the church can get from it. Okay, that's why we call it a narcissistic system. So am I against Church of the Highlands and Chris Hodges and all those guys? No. Am I against ARC? Yes, but not because of the people. I'm against it because of the prevalence of the narcissistic systems. I think, one, get us off of the biblical mandate for what the church is supposed to be. But the biggest reason is the hurt that it brings to people. Because people, from my experience, not just in a church that ran this, not just sitting in these rooms, but as a church consultant, from my experience looking at thousands of churches, and by the time we get done with our next research project, we may go over tens of thousands of churches that run systems similar to this, it does a lot of damage to people. And I think for you guys, y'all have not seen the inside stuff until I started sharing it with you. You've seen the damage it does to people, right? So we're going to talk about Growth Track. Buck, you're already on a couple of viral videos talking about Growth Track that made people mad. Abby, I don't think you are, but you might be after this because you're pretty passionate about this. But regardless of where you're at on this, here's where we want to start. Regardless of where you're at on Growth Track, maybe you're at a church you love, you think it's healthy, and they use Growth Track, okay? We're not telling you to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're not telling you need to agree with us. We're simply going to share where we are and why at SAI, part of the reasons why we look at the Growth Track itself as a red flag, okay, especially in our red flag reviews of churches. But we want you to ask questions. You don't have to agree with us, but will you ask questions? Because at the end of the day, people are what matter most, making disciples of people that Jesus died for. So this conversation is not saying, hey, let's get rid of Growth Track, but it is saying if we're going to keep Growth Track, we've got to reform Growth Track, because the way it's done right now, it's really just people are becoming a means to an end.
And so for me, like as a business owner, I suck at systems. Like I'm awful at systems, but I'm always looking for, and this is what she calls it, I'm always looking for a magic little pill. I'm always looking for, what is that system? What is that thing that can make my business easier? What can make my business grow faster? What's going to bring in more revenue from a business perspective? And I think Growth Track is very much the same thing for churches. And, you know, and I'm not equating that to revenue, maybe later, but
I'll equate it to revenue. It's 100% equated to revenue.
But it's more people equals more revenue. And so Growth Track is a plug and play system, you know, that allows them to bring in more people and to use the human resource. Because as people, we are resources. We're resources to our employers. We're resources to, even my business has people, and my business is a resource for our clients. So we are a resource, and Growth Track allows them to sterilize the human resource and, you know, to kind of get everybody plugged into the system and to make drones in the system that allows them to plug and play. And so the promise is that it takes a lot of the messiness out. And so I see Growth Track and this system as a magic pill, but we can't avoid the messiness of ministry. And it allows preachers to not be pastors. Is one of my biggest complaints with it, is it allows the person in the pulpit to not actually pastor his flock.
Yeah, well, if you got a good teacher and you got a good CEO, and they don't have to be the same person, then you can run this system well. And it is, in a lot of ways, it's a magic pill. And look, the reason why, I believe this started out with a good heart. I really do. Okay? We need more people to serve. We need more people to give so that we can reach more people for the kingdom. Okay? And then we can teach new church plants to do this. It worked well for us. It'll work well for them. The problem, though, the good news, here's why it works, and it will work. If you plant a church and you use these systems, your church will grow. You will have enough money. I'm telling you, it will work like clockwork.
But you're making disciples of the system, not Jesus.
Exactly. But when you do that, right, the focus gets shifted. Because why does it work? It works because it's replicable no matter what community. If you're doing this in a Western community, you're doing this anywhere in the United States, you're doing it in Canada, you're doing it in Australia, it's going to work, okay? But think about our communities. They are so different. They are so different. People are so different. So anytime something works with everyone, it's usually because we're missing something with the individuals, okay? We're missing, and when you look at an Eastern view of discipleship, which, Buck, I want you to be on this podcast episode, something I want to do soon. We're finally ready to break down that Eastern first century view of discipleship. I've been chewing on that for about 2 years. We're going to do it, okay? But when we do that, right, you're going to see that discipleship was not a system that you could repeat. It was something you did with each person, but it took years. It was one-on-one, and it looked vastly different with every single person, right? So from the early church on, every time we tried to systematize discipleship, we've stopped making disciples and we made cogs, okay? We don't need more cogs in the wheels. We need disciples. So, Abby, for you, like just as you look at, kind of give the 10,000-foot overview, as you look at Growth Track, why are you so passionate about like discussing this? And why are you so passionate? Because you guys are both, hey, if we see this in a church, we're out on that church and generally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to talk about some of the good things first to get that established, because I have a passion for the church. I have a passion for organization, for systems. He's not the system guy. I am the system person, and we need systems. The church has a side of it that is business. Should church be a business only? No, but that is there is a business side of church, and there's nothing wrong with that, because it does need money to operate. There are expenses, there are things. So you've got to have certain systems in place to run a church.
And I would say, so I'll push back on that just a little bit. So just pause right there. I would say, one, this is a beautiful system. Mm-hmm. I'm a systems guy. I teach business systems. I teach church systems. It's one of the reasons why I struggle with systems. Systems are needed. This is a beautiful system as far as it works beautifully. What it does to people and how it works with the biblical idea of church, that's what I struggle with, right?
And me too. So this thing, go ahead.
Let me push back one more time if I can.
Yes.
Okay. You said, and I just want you to think about this. You don't have to answer this. I want our listeners to think about this. We'll talk about this more in future episodes. But you said the church has to be a business. It has to have money to run. Does it?
As an organization.
Well, but
not as like church.
If we look at the first 100 years of the church, did it run as an organization? Is that what Jesus died for? That's where I go back and I ask those questions, because I just wonder if we become so attached to the idol of the institution that we miss the organism.
I think God organized it himself at the beginning, because they didn't know what they were doing. There was no system to follow. Everything was like made up as it goes, as you go along. And so there were the times when everybody felt called to do one thing or another thing. There were the times when they felt led to gather in certain places at certain times. There were the times when, and I think that's all creating this kind of the system. But I think also that there was the time when everybody's giving and donating everything and holding everything in common. So to a certain degree, that's partly how they were funded, So, I mean, there was somewhat of funding, but instead of money, it was probably things as well as money. But
it was money. Money was involved.
Yeah. So there was an element to that. And I think there is that kind of business funding side of things that has to happen. But that was people led. It wasn't demanded, and it wasn't necessarily a top down thing. The top was God. I mean, God's the one that would zap you, if you weren't doing it right.
Well, and it wasn't the organization that got corrected when there were giving issues. It was people like Ananias and Sapphira, where it was, hey, Peter said, you didn't have to give. You didn't have to give what you said. You just had to be honest about what you were giving, right? But I would just, and again, I want to unpress pause and you go straight back into growth track, but I just want people to start asking this question. When did the leadership that we see now, when did the organizational institutional structure come in? When did we need money to take care of things instead of taking care of people, to take care of programs instead of taking care of people? There was one program in the early church. There were two programs. There was feeding the widows and orphans, and there was a relief offering when bad things happened, right? That was it. There were two programs. When did that start? And I would just challenge people that all of that started after the apostles had died, and the next two generations were trying to figure out how to do it. And if you look, every change that was made gave people who already had power and influence more power and influence.
Thinking about systems is even in our Western society, and I might have said this before, but we're such a microwave immediate society. Everybody expects things now, but it's really hard to gather people without some kind of system and without some kind of schedule. Like there's almost no spontaneity left in society, because people have regular intervals and soccer practices for their kids. And there's just all this scheduling conflicts that makes it almost impossible to do church without a schedule. And I think what we've lost is the ability to be church in our schedule, in the context of our schedule in our life that we're already living. And so, I love the institution of church, but more than anything, me personally, I love the organism where you're out in the field during work and there's just somebody that the Lord lays on your heart to pray for them. And you just stop and like, you know what? Let's pray. I can tell you're stressed. I can tell you're worn out. Or I can just tell that you need prayer. And to stop and to care for people in the moment. And so that's being the church. And so I think that there is still a delineation between going to church and being church.
Let's create a system for that.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Well, and I'll say this is the last thing I'll say on this because I don't want this episode to become that because we're going to do a lot of different pieces of that. It's not your fault. It's my fault. It's 100% my fault. I brought it up and pushed on it. But I will say this: I don't think because there's going to be some people who hear some of these questions I'm asking and without giving answers and just asking questions are going to go, Jeff wants to burn down the institution of the church. I don't. Okay. The institution, I believe, is needed in Western Christianity. And even if we needed to burn down the institution, that is so much cognitive dissonance it's going to create that it would take 3 generations to do it. Okay. But what I will say is this: we've got to understand where the institution came from so that the institution is always serving the organism of the church and the people, and that we're not making an idol out of protecting the institution. Because as we're going to see with systems like Growth Track, people make an idol out of protecting the systems of the institution instead of the people of the church, right? But I mean, if you talk to an early first century Christian though, and you talked about going to church, like how can we go to something we are, right? So we do have to ask these questions. Okay, systems are good. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but systems need constant reform because systems are magnetized toward efficiency, and the church is not about efficiency. The church is about transformation, and transformation of people is messy. It's not efficient. We try to make it efficient, we're going to break people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so I'll read this. This is the first statement of like Growth Track, page 1, and it says
That's the book from
this
Church
is
Lives.
the book that you fill in the blank as you go through the classes.
Okay.
So it says,
And can y'all explain real quick? Can y'all just explain in your own words, what is Growth Track? Because you've seen this. So for someone who's not familiar, what is Growth Track?
Growth Track is typically 3 to 4 classes that the church will say, if you want to learn more about our church, come to step 101, whatever. So you go learn about the church. Then they'll say, okay, and then the next steps is let's find out what you're good at, what you're gifted in, what your spiritual gifts are, and then let's get you plugged in to serving, and that way you can have community. Which none of that sounds terrible. None of that is terrible.
No, it's all good. And a lot of churches that run this system, if you notice, their mission and vision statements are actually tied to the system. So I'll point that out when we come to it.
Mm-hmm. So this reads, or do you agree with that? Is that kind of
No,
how you describe it?
I would.
We're not always on the same page.
I would say Growth Track is where, let's say, a new believer or new member. So you go visit this church, you're new to a community, you go visit a church, and you're like, man, I really like it here. They've got great worship. That was a good word from the pastor. I'm going to join. And you're all excited. And Growth Track's where they send you to die. That's where they send you.
Tell us how you really feel.
That's where they send excited, fired up people to put them through a factory to get them to conform to their system.
This is what happened to Buck. He is saying this because this being new 15 years ago to us. This 15 years ago at a big church, that's how we met. And then we went to join the church, and we went through this Growth Track, which we'd never heard of before. It sounded great. And that's kind of what he felt like happened to him.
It just slowly took your passion and burnt you out.
Yeah.
It said you had to fit in this box.
Yeah.
He's not a box fitter.
There are also a lot of
big
people
guy.
who love
Yeah.
the system and who get really passionate about it until they absolutely burn out, and they go from being really passionate about it to not passionate about it. So I think part of this, and we should say part of this is Buck's experience. We're not saying this is for everybody. But the factory part is 100% right, though.
Yes.
It's the volunteer factory. It's the giving factory. It's how we turn people who aren't members of our church into the way I've heard it described most often is fully engaged members of our church.
It's the smelting factory. It's where they take this rough iron ore of the human resource and they make it into a usable resource, which is finances, being voluntold, and it's where you go and get melted down and conform to the mold that they want you. And I'm telling you, once you go through Growth Track, it takes about 2 to 3 years, if you don't fit into that mold, to get burned out and go find another church that's doing some other form of Growth Track under different names, and they try to force you into that mold. And it takes you about 2 to 3 years there to see behind the curtain that you're like, wow, I must have some impurities when I was smelted.
Yeah.
So...
Well, and even if you fit into it, even if you fit into the mold and you find a great place to serve, I would say 3 to 5 years is about the lifespan of a volunteer in these systems. Because if you look, churches that run these systems, and again, if you're a pastor and you've got different numbers, share them with me. Pastors normally don't want to share these numbers. The numbers that I have seen as a consultant, the numbers that I have seen on these church staffs, okay, the back door is normally open as wide, if not wider, than the front door. But because these churches are normally in larger cities, you bring a lot of people in, and people don't notice all the people who are leaving because you are growing. Now, there is a point where these churches hit a saturation point. The smaller the city you're in, the quicker that happens. You hit a saturation point, and everybody has an idea of what your church is. Well, then when you can't bring people in anymore, that's when those churches start failing. But if you're in large cities, man, you could go 40, 50 years and not hit that saturation point, right? Especially if they're transient cities, you may never hit it. But I think what you said, Buck, and I want to draw attention to this, you said it's the factory where they conform you to the mold of what they want you to be, something like that, okay? Scripture says something about that. I do believe, and you guys can look up the reference, but Scripture says, do not be conformed to the mold of this world. The do not be conformed to this world is a word picture of being pressed into a metal mold, right? Do not be conformed. It's we're pressing you to look like everyone else in this world, to do what everyone else in this world is doing. Well, Scripture says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Well, I think we could also say, do not be conformed into the pattern of the churches of this world or the church culture of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How? Well, Jesus said it was through discipleship. Okay? So it always concerns me when we're being conformed into a mold, and there is a mold. There's only so many places you can fit in this system. It concerns me that we're doing more conforming instead of transforming.
Well, and this is not, I have written at the top, and after skimming through this again so many years later, this is not discipleship. And this is not and I don't think when they create, this is the problem I have with this, a main problem. So I love the idea of membership in a church, as long as membership means something. Right now, membership doesn't mean anything, and this is just a whole nother thing, but I like if somebody's going to join us, if I'm going to join a church, I want to be required to do something. I want to be required to be in a small group, required to serve in a ministry, required to tithe. And I know y'all are not going to disagree with me on this stuff, but I personally want my membership to mean something. I don't want to join a church. I mean, I've joined churches and it's like, yay. It doesn't matter. So what does it matter if my name's on the list? So except for their big
And
people,
I agree,
right?
Membership needs to mean something, but it means something when if you don't serve, the church doesn't survive. It means something when you have a voting voice, and if you don't give your voting voice, then different decisions are made or they're not made, right? Where I push back is on things like the tithing, and it's simply because we don't need humans in the church to tell us we're required to do something that the Bible doesn't tell us we're required to. So I want it to mean something. I want us to have requirements, just the biblical requirements.
Sure.
And the requirements should be give, just not tithe, right? Hey, Disruptors, I want to tell you about my friend Dustin Stepp and the East Tennessee Mentorship Association and how they can help you heal from religious trauma, spiritual abuse, or just become the best version of you. East Tennessee Mentorship Association is a veteran-owned mental health support and personal development organization that acknowledges the importance of your deeply held beliefs as a factor in their overall well-being. Through one-on-one mentorship sessions, culturally neutral small groups, workshops, outdoor activities, and more, they can contribute to your journey, offering battle-tested perspectives to help you move past your obstacles and toward your potential. If you want to change your life and you're ready to do your part of the work in a supportive environment, then call East Tennessee Mentorship Association today at 865-282-4403. That's 865-282-4403. Go ahead, give them a call, and tell them Church Disrupted sent you for a special rate. I'm telling you now, you won't regret it. And thank you to East Tennessee Mentorship Association for your support of the Church Disrupted podcast.
So I like that this whole program is, despite what it says in this first sentence I'm going to read, this whole program is actually, if you boil it down, it is designed for people to learn about the church so they'll want to join it and serve in it, period. That's all this is about. So what I have a problem with is the fact that
y'all described what you saw Growth Track as. I'll tell you how they describe it.
Yeah.
How the creators describe it and how the pastors who run it describe it. It's our assimilation system. It's how we get people into the system so the church can grow.
Mm-hmm. And if that's and I don't think there should be any shame in that. As long as you also have discipleship. And what is your discipleship plan? My one of my biggest problems is I fear that people think that Growth Track is this, which it says in the first sentence, which it is not. The Highlands Growth Track guides you to discover God's unique purpose for your life and how to live that life that He has created for you. You know what? That has nothing to do with this. And if most people think, what would you expect after that sentence? You would not expect join the church, find out what your gifts are so you can figure out what team to join. That's not what you're expecting. That's not
You just
what
promised me understanding my unique purpose in life.
life. How
What
to
I was
grow as a
created
disciple.
for.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lie to me. I mean, manipulation.
It's misleading, and it's making this big promise. And so people are expecting this to be like, oh, if I go through these steps, which is new Christians especially, that's the target. Because the new Christians are the ones that desperately are looking for, what is my purpose? And to answer these questions. So we're bringing in all these new, and a lot of times newer Christians, people that we're seeking, because a lot of times it is a seeker-sensitive church. So the people that we're seeking, and now they're coming in and we're saying, oh, I'm so glad you became a Christian. Now here, how would you like to join my church? And we'd like to get you plugged in as a volunteer, because that's what Jesus wants.
I'll help you fulfill your purpose, but here's what happens. Once and learning your gifting is helpful, guys. It is helpful.
Yes.
Because it's a part of your purpose. But when I learn my gifting, but then you say, okay, well, now get in a small group, now tithe, and the most important thing is join the dream team. So now I'm in kids ministry. Then I think my purpose in life that I was put on here for, because that was the promise, is that I join the kids ministry, and my purpose is to do kids ministry and tithe and be in a small group. When Jesus would look at that and go, well, that's not the church I left you guys with. I didn't leave you with small groups. I didn't leave you with tithing. I didn't leave you with kids ministry.
Right.
Like, you see what I'm talking about? And I'm not saying kids ministry is bad, but Jesus didn't leave us with kids ministry, right? So we end up thinking, oh, this is my purpose. And it's like a big bait and switch.
It is. Absolutely.
Versus my purpose for so long, because of churches doing things like this and good churches that meant well, I thought my purpose was what I could do in the church, which led me to be a full-time pastor, a minister as a vocation, because that's the highest level of pursuing that purpose I could have. When no, my ministry purpose, I have realized, it's why I'm not in the church anymore. My ministry purpose is not about being in the walls of that building. It's about how I am the church and how I speak into the church outside. Part of my purpose, I hate it. I wish it wasn't a thing. It's to bring correction. And it's to say, hey, and when I say bring correction, it's not go, hey, do it my way. It's going, hey, what did Jesus say was the way? That's part of my purpose, right? A big part of my purpose is the way that I make disciples. And I have to do that outside of the church. Right now, I still go to a church. I love my church. But when we tell people your purpose is what you do in the church, and then every church has the same purpose for you, find one of our teams, give, and get in a group. Well, now we have cheapened the gospel, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So my question is, how many stories does the Bible tell us about the heroes of faith? I mean, we can look at Hebrews, look at the story of Saul. How many stories does the Bible tell us about a quality assimilated person? None. There is not a single story in Scripture that talks about the value of assimilating.
Some of the hardest scriptures to digest is God saying, if you let these people into Israel and into your nation, they're not going to assimilate.
Yeah, and so we look at that. Now we're supposed to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and we're supposed to be conformed to the image of Christ. But so that's the thing. It shifts the purpose from being transformed by Christ into the conformity of the image of Christ. It shifts it from that to be assimilated into a system. And it really comes back to the discipleship conversation, which we're making disciples of systems and not disciples of Jesus.
Yep.
And the more I sit here and listen to her talk, I'm just shaking my head, getting a little ticked off, because this really pisses me off, because she said it so well. It pisses me off because it is such a lie. You know, and I'm thinking, I think it's Revelation 3:9 that talks about the synagogue of Satan. And I would say that this is equivalent to the synagogue of Satan, in my opinion. And it's that way because we're not leading people to Christ.
Yeah.
And if you're not leading people to Christ, I mean, they come to Christ. Hi, Christ, we met you. Congratulations. Now come follow us. So we're not leading people into the image of Christ and into conformity to the image of Christ. We're leading people away from their created purpose while lying to them and telling them we're helping them discover their purpose.
Yeah.
And it's manipulation, and to me, it's total manipulation. It's total lies, and to me, this is inspired by the father of lies.
Well, and one of the things that we talk about at SAI all the time is we tend to draw big, bold lines, and sometimes I draw big, bold lines, and SAI doesn't. Okay, let's just be clear. Sometimes they're my lines. And I'm trying to delineate, is this my line or is this an SAI line? And I think that's a big, bold line for you. And the people who draw the biggest, boldest lines where we go, oh, you're overreacting, because I know there's going to be some people who say, oh, Buck's overreacting, right? The people who draw the biggest, boldest lines have been hurt the most and traumatized the most when people cross those lines, okay? Why do we draw bigger, bolder lines than other people? It's a protection mechanism. That's all it is.
For me, it's not as much that I've been hurt. I've seen the damage it does to other people.
Yeah.
I've seen so many people get hurt by it. And I've seen so many people misled. I've seen so many people leave the church that are hungry for true Christian community, that are hungry to truly be transformed by the renewing of their mind. And the church is lying to them.
Yeah. And I think that's where it becomes such a big deal, Buck, as you said, the key word, manipulation. So is it bad, right? Is it bad? Well, hold on. Is it bad for people to serve in their church in a ministry program? No.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No. So that's good.
Yeah.
Is it bad for someone to give to their church monetarily? No. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Give to your church. Is it bad to be in a small group? Absolutely not. I'm in a small group. Love a small group, right? What makes it bad is we don't call it what it is. This is an assimilation system to help you get involved in the life of the church the way we do church. And it's manipulation in that we tell them it's something different. This is how to discover your purpose. And people think, a lot of Christians in the seeker-sensitive movement think that being a fully devoted follower of Jesus means being in a small group, giving, and serving. And that's not what it means. So I want to be clear. Everything about Growth Track is not bad. These are all good things. The problem is with the manipulation. And I want to go back, Abby, and I'm going to let you just kind of keep leading through this, and then we'll just stop and poke at it, which will be hard enough.
Yeah.
I actually stopped on page 2, because what you stopped on, and you said this is where it starts, that's page 6. Okay.
Yeah, or technically page 1 after all their pretty stuff.
Yeah, all their pretty stuff. So I'm going through their pretty stuff. The first page just says Growth Track with the logo. The second page, all it is a verse, but think about what this communicates. The verse is John 10:10, Jesus saying, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full, or have it more abundantly. Before they promise you discovering your purpose, the promise of Growth Track is we're gonna show you how to find that abundant life Jesus talked about. But that's not how you find it, right? So I think it uses Scripture to promise something, and the very first words they tell you coming down after the table of contents is, this is going to guide you to discover God's unique purpose for your life. It feels so big and it feels so holy. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that, right? And then it goes and it tells you, here's the 3 steps the Growth Track is made out of. Connect you to the church, discover your strengths and intentional design, and use your God-given gifts to make a difference in the lives of others. Notice what that doesn't say. It says connect to the church. After that, it's all about making a difference in the lives of others.
Yeah.
But what you're going to notice is the way you make a difference in the lives of others is only through joining teams that makes the church look good and does it their way. So no one's going through Growth Track, as far as I see it. And y'all tell me if you see something different. I don't see anybody going through Growth Track and them saying, hey, based on your spiritual gifts and the way that you're wired, we think you need to be a kingdom entrepreneur doing marketplace ministry as a business owner. I don't see anybody being sent out that way.
That's not the purpose growth track. I mean,
Well, that doesn't assimilate you into the church. That gets you busy. That gets you distracted.
yeah. I mean, the purpose, if they were just to stick to the purpose, I would have no problem with it. I think it's fantastic. When you get to the back, there's page after page of like matching your spiritual gifts that you have to like, oh, well, these different areas where you can connect in our church, which people typically want to do. They want to connect. They want to meet friends.
If you tell me this is helping me connect to the church, that's great.
I'm looking for community within my church. If this is how you do it, I'll do it.
But don't conflate it with my God-given design and purpose.
Exactly.
And the connect to the church, I take a little bit of exception to that too, because they're connecting you to the institution of the church. And when I read connect me to the church, but when I read connect me to the church, it like stirs this thing in my heart where I want to be connected with other believers, to do life together, to have community. That's not what that's talking about.
You know how you got connected to the church in the first century? So I'll get into just a little bit of this. Just give you a teaser. I won't go into why and how I know. Okay. But we think, there was no sinner's prayer in the first century. There wasn't a sinner's prayer for centuries. Centuries.
Right.
Sinner's prayer is pretty new.
That you need to do a whole episode on that.
There wasn't a sinner's prayer. Do you know what people did to come to faith in Christ? What the sinner's prayer, what the action was?
Get baptized.
Baptism. And you know what happened when you got baptized? Someone came alongside of you, and while you were still wet, said, I'm discipling you and showing you everything it means, everything I know about what it means to follow Jesus.
Wow.
That's connecting to the church, right? So again, I agree that connecting to the church is a good thing as the institution, but people struggle today. I struggle sometimes to see the difference between connecting to the body of Christ and connecting to the institution or organization of the local church building I go to, right? And I think this inadvertently, I don't think they're doing it on purpose. I think, again, a lot of us do this because we see the church this way. Maybe they're doing it on purpose. I don't know. But I think this inadvertently makes the church a thing we go to instead of a thing we are.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it was called church.
It was called the ecclesia.
Yeah.
The gathering, the called out ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Germanic word kirch, where we get church, refers to the building, not the called out ones. I mean, so even in our language and the way it's translated,
we're doing a whole episode on that one if you want to be a part of it. So
yeah. So, but I love that they had page after page of matching up, where you could fit into the church, and
helps you get a good idea of the way I'm wired. What's a good place for me to help my church?
Yes, and I think a lot of us, especially, I think most of us could benefit from the different assessments that they have you take. We can benefit from it. However, the way it's sold is it's the be-all, end-all, and it's actually sold as discipleship. And this is how you get discipled. This is how it says, discover God's unique purpose for your life.
It's not very unique.
And how to live the life He's created you to. And then you get into it, it has nothing to do with that. So that's
God's unique design for our life. Think about this. God's unique design for our life and how he intended that we live. Well, we know what our grand purpose is. Our purpose is to make disciples. Our purpose is to know God and make him known. Our purpose is to, and we forget about this a lot of times, we think about it, we go straight to discipleship. It's what we do for God. Our purpose is to know God, to walk with God, to commune with God, right? So we all have the same grand purpose, but our unique individual, how God has wired us to walk this out. That's what I think of when I'm thinking of purpose. How I walk out this. So gifting's a part of it, but you can have two people with the exact same giftings, exact same skill sets, and the way they're going to walk those out is very, very different, right? But for most of us, and I would contend with this, most of us, the way that we actually live out that unique purpose, how God wants us to fulfill being a Christ follower in the world, it's actually going to happen outside the walls of a church building, not inside, right? So I think that's something that we miss with this too. So let's just walk through what are there any other good things that you want to highlight? Because you highlighted some good things, and then we got distracted before we highlighted all the good things.
I just think the main core is good.
Just say what it is.
All the stuff on the outside, all the stuff they're adding. Yeah.
Okay. So after it says this, Abby, after it says, hey, here's what Highlands is for, it's help you discover your unique purpose. They really ham it up. They pair it with John 10:10. Here's the steps. Step 1, become a member, right? So think about this. Here's the promise. The promise is we're going to guide you to discover God's unique purpose for your life and how to live the life he created for you. Paired with John 10:10, it's going to be an abundant life. So here's how you live that life God created for you. Become a member of our church.
Yep. Number 1.
Does that sound like that sounds like a letdown to me. Connect. So here's step 1. Here's week 1. Connect with Highlands and discover the ins and outs of the church. Learn our details and beliefs, leadership, church government, how we handle money, all of that. That's all good stuff. Every church should tell you up front, here's how we're led. Here's how we do finances. All of those are fantastic things, Church of the Highlands. It just has nothing to do with your purpose. If it's, hey, we want to assimilate you into our church, well, the first thing is, do you want to become a member? And if you want to become a member, we need to be transparent about how we operate because you need to know as a member of that body. Okay, so I think step 1 is good. It just doesn't fit the bill of what's promised, okay? Now, step 2, discover your design, okay? Dive into the details of your personality, discover your gifts, and begin the journey of discovering your unique design and how you can make a difference in the lives of others, okay? Now, what it doesn't tell you is the way you make a difference in the lives of others. That's all inside the church building, okay? Or if it's outside, it's their way on their team, okay? But the personality test, I love them, okay? I'm a business consultant. I use them all the time. I love them, all right? Spiritual gifts test, helpful. A student pastor for a long time. That's helpful when people don't know what those things are. Mm-hmm. But there's a reason why discipleship matters, because discipleship is someone calling out what they see, right, in you. There's never a spiritual gifts test or a disc test or any of that in Scripture for a reason. It's not just because they didn't have it. It's because we're all wired so uniquely. Now, what it does have is it has a list of gifts, and you say, do I see these in myself? What do these mean? And then you go to other people who are discipling you and who you trust, and you say, do you see any of these in me? How do you see that fleshed out, right? So discovering your design, discovering your gifts and stuff is helpful. I don't know that that's your design. And we're using man-made tools. I think if you just said that, hey, we're going to use some of the best tools we have to help you get started on discovering your design, I think that would be more accurate. And then step 3, this is what it all leads up to. Why are you becoming a member? Why are you getting your gifts? Join the team. Find out what it means to make a difference, and I underline this, with Highlands. That is the first time that I think they've been honest. How do we make a difference, not in the lives of others, with Highlands, okay? And again, learning how to serve, learning how to use your gifts in the church is a good start. But if we're helping people find their purpose, we have to talk about what does it look like for you to live that outside of these walls. Any thoughts on just the 3 steps? Some churches do it in 4 steps.
I think taking out that second step right there and kind of squeezing that maybe into step 3 would be a lot more accurate.
Make it 2 steps.
Yeah, just make it 2 steps. Step 1, learn about the church. Step 2,
join the team.
Join the team. Let's give you all the opportunities. Oh, you're not really sure where to serve. How about you take these?
Yeah, but pull out the discover your design, which is manipulative.
Make that a whole thing about discipleship, a whole different set of classes if you want.
Well, if I'm joining the team, and that's what it is, and I know that's what it is, and I know that's all it is, then I can unjoin the team in a season where I need to, right? But if I'm discovering my design, and part of my unique design and calling and purpose is to be on the team, well, then I'm walking outside of God's design and purpose.
And what about the guilt for people that are trying so hard and then can't? The single mom that's got her hands full, and she just, I've heard these people talk about how much guilt they feel for not being able to do all the things in the church that they feel like they're supposed to do.
As a staff member, I've looked people in the eyes who felt so guilty, like they felt like they were letting God down when they stepped away from serving in youth ministry. Yeah. And it's like, no, you go, your mental health, your spiritual health, your family, it all comes first. And I would tell so many volunteers, your first ministry is always to your family. Okay? So don't feel bad. We'll be okay. We're going to miss you because you bring something vital to this body, but we're going to miss you, and you're still a part of this body. You don't have to serve in this ministry to be a part of this body. So know you're going to be missed, but we'll be okay. God's got this. I've watched people deal with this guilt. I've dealt with this guilt.
You're right.
You just see a lot of professional Christians, and by professional Christians, I mean people that get paid to be a Christian. You see a lot of professional Christians putting a lot of burdens on amateur Christians. Amateur Christians are people that don't get paid to be a Christian. And so you see professional Christians putting burdens on amateurs. And to me, there is no, I think leadership in church, and what this shows me is whoever got paid to write this, it shows me that they have no grid for what life looks like outside of the four walls, because their job, their whole world is within the four walls of the institution of the church.
And as a former staff member of a large church, I can tell you, most pastors, for a long time, I didn't. We don't actually have a good idea of what regular life looks like because it's been so long since that's what we did.
Exactly.
It's so insular. You know, it's like, well, we get to come to work and we pray in the morning, have a Bible study, we have staff meetings about Jesus, and then we talk about systems and everything else. So they get to eat, sleep, drink, the church and church systems. And to me, this is just it's steeped in the dichotomy of the laity and the clergy.
Which again, going back to church history, Buck, laity and clergy was not a distinction that Jesus or the apostles made.
Did you not read where Jesus said, "And thou shalt be called clergy," to the apostles?
Well, I'll just say this because you made a good point about like Christian amateurism, basically. There are no amateur Christians. There are no professional Christians. In the kingdom, there are simply Christ followers and people who are not Christ followers, okay? Yeah. The worst distinction the church has ever made was between laity and clergy and making professional Christians, okay?
Oh, it's definitely a derogatory term when it comes out of my mouth.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying it as someone who spent a large portion of my life, my job, my career was to be a professional Christian. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the worst things that's happened to the church. I'm not saying that pastors should never be paid. I'm not saying we should never have church staff, but when we pay them, we got to think about what we're paying them for. We're not paying them to make them professionals. We're paying them so that they don't have to take time away from serving the flock and serving the body.
So they can dedicate themselves and still provide for their families. But they have a lot of times clergy have no grid for the life of someone that's not getting paid to do ministry. And that's really what I mean. And so you can sit here and you see that their whole grid is tied up in this church system. Their whole grid is tied up in being a professional Christian. And then they wonder why they have to create systems to get other people to act like they're professionals without getting paid.
Yeah. Well, and you think about all the programs, like you go through programs like this, and even, my church doesn't use these programs or anything like this, but
Amen.
There's things I could be involved in throughout the week at church that I have to say no to. And the reason why I have to say no to is basically, other than the few things I do on Sunday mornings with my church, it's, guys, I don't have any time between my job, between my family, and the ministry I'm committed to outside the walls. I have zero time through the week. There is not a single night of the week where I have time to be involved with another church program. So in order to do that, I have to either take away from my family or take away from the ministry that I'm called to outside of the church, or take away from my own personal care, and then I get burnt out. And a lot of us, we don't realize this. There's always an opportunity to serve at the church. There's always another night you can be there. And when I was a professional Christian, there was always another night I was asking people to be there. These are good things. What I didn't realize was every time they said yes to a church program, they were saying no to something else. A lot of times their family, a lot of times themselves, and then they burn out completely. And sometimes they were having to say no to the ministry they needed to be doing outside the walls, right, in order to say yes to church stuff. And I think that's dangerous. But for the professional Christian and for pastors, it's, hey, let's build all these programs, these good things to get people involved and be at the church. And is that a bad thing? No. But in current culture and life, most people don't have time who aren't even thinking about doing ministry, let alone if you're trying to do ministry outside the church. We can't be at the church all the time.
We got to figure out how to do things small. I mean, we've got to figure out how to do things on a budget. This is where our whole society's at right now. We don't have as many people that can as easily volunteer. So this is a whole nother thing. We'll get to it. But that's down on Dream Team, the word excellence.
Right, let's talk about it. What do you think we need to go to next?
Can I say one more thing real quick?
Yeah.
So the Great Commission says, as you go.
Yeah, as you were going, literally.
As you were going. But the mentality of the professional Christians is as you come. Yep. So they're not sending, they're constantly calling people in, trying to gather more people. And and that's even this isn't sending people.
No.
This is trying to call and accumulate more people.
Collecting people.
It's collecting people. And it reminds me of Gollum, my precious.
We're collecting people and gifts for our programs and our ministry to grow.
That's it. But it's not as you go. And if the church stopped and read the Bible and just focused on those words, as you are going, it would change everything.
So can I give you an example?
Yeah. So
okay, this example is going to make some people mad. There's going to be some people who go, "Oh, Jeff doesn't love Jesus. He's not a Christian. Let's turn off Church Disrupted," which is okay if that's what you think. It's probably not a good podcast for you, right? My wife and I were at a wedding of a friend. I'm not going to say who it was because they're on the podcast from time to time. But we were at a wedding for a friend, and we were at this wedding, and we were having a party because two of our friends were getting married. They loved Jesus. Jesus was all up in this wedding. We also had booze at the wedding, and we had a party. And if you don't like that, don't read the Bible, because New Testament weddings, including the ones that Jesus went to, it was a party and there were booze, okay? And don't tell me the booze weren't strong enough, because in the whole Jesus turning water into wine, they explain you usually bring out the bad stuff after people are sloshed, because then they don't know the difference, right? But we're having a good time. We're at this party. I'm multiple drinks in, and I just want to be, having fun with my friends. And I see someone who was from the church I was a part of for so long, who was in my student ministry. I remember they were an intern. We used them. We burnt them out, and we discarded them. And I have another friend who brings him up to me and says, "Hey, do you remember who this is?" And this guy he was a kid. Last time I saw him, he was like a 17-year-old, 18-year-old. Now he's grown, got a job, got a mustache. Totally didn't recognize the guy. And when he told me who it was, the first words out of my mouth, Buck, were, "I'm so sorry, and I owe you an apology." And he said, "What for?" And I said, "Dude, we totally mistreated you. And I did what I was told was right. I did, what the system wanted me to do, and I regret it. And I'm so sorry I did not pastor you well in that moment." And he said, "Hey, you don't have to apologize to me. You don't have to do all that." And I said, "No, I do. And I have to do this in front of people. And I'm so sorry." Well, then we started a conversation, right? And I took myself out of the party. We started a conversation. And 2 hours later, when the wedding ended, we had been through church history. We had been through Bible. This person said, "I'm struggling with some freedom issues. I'm struggling with some freedom issues because the church says I got to do this, this, and this, but I don't feel in my spirit like it's right." So it's like, but how can it not be right if it's what the Bible says? So we went through what the Bible says and church history says. And I said, "I want to give you freedom in this area." We got done, and he's like, "That's like a weight lifted off. I've never had this much freedom in this area." We had picked up other people coming into the conversation, asking questions about it. We were the church. We were having church. We were being the church as we were going. 1 minute, I was partying at a wedding with a drink in my hand. The next minute, I am doing this, right? And people would come over, and they're like, "Hey, man, why aren't you partying with us over here?" "Well, we're having a good discussion about the Bible," right? And for some people, that freaks them out. How could you go from drinking 1 minute and partying to having a discussion about the Bible the next minute? Well, that's what Jesus was a part of. That's what the apostles were a part of. That's what life looked like. You go from celebration to these things, right? And we did that. That was being the church as I was going. That was me making disciples as I was going.
Yes.
And it started with "I owe you an apology." But for a lot of people, they would say, "Well, that can't be church because you were already drinking at a wedding. You should have been at a program at the church. Your church should have been your wedding should have been in a church that wouldn't let y'all drink." And it's like, guys, come on. We're missing the point. As you were going, it looks like just being ready to be Jesus wherever you're at, even if that's till almost midnight at a wedding.
I bet y'all were dancing too, weren't you?
Well, they were. I don't dance. Jeff doesn't dance.
The next place Buck is going to want to go is is step 2, which is discover your design. And I think Buck wants to talk about the DISC personality assessment and the spiritual gifts inventory and the use and promise of those things. Am I right?
It's like the Holy Spirit speaking for you, Buck.
Closest thing he's got. Just kidding.
Ouch.
I think that was a question of your salvation right there on the podcast.
She knows my fruit, so she gets to see my fruit of the looms more than she does.
Get
fruit of the
an
Spirit.
earful.
All right, we do put an explicit tag on this podcast, but I don't want to go that direction.
No, I meant seeing my butt, not
there
like
you
Yeah.
like.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know. I don't know if you want to get me started.
No, I do want to get you started. This is one of his like soapboxes. So if we need a stool so you can stand, that's okay.
Yeah. So really, what it comes down to me, and we've hit on it, and we've hit all around it, is that it's more discover your purpose as you come into the body or as you come into the institution, and not discover your purpose as you go, because the purpose, the Bible already tells us what our purpose is. Mm-hmm. It's simple. Go, make disciples, go.
By the way,
that's make disciples, not converts, but we'll get into that in another podcast episode.
Yeah.
But why not, what's your problem with using these assessments? Because as soon as any church ever mentions, and we're going to give you an assessment, you almost come out of your chair.
And so it's not the assessment. It is, but it isn't. So, but I think a lot of times the Lord uses us where we're weak. And so they're measuring where we're strong. And so he uses us in our weakness.
I'm made perfect in your weakness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he wants to use our weakness. And so I think it would almost be more truthful in a lot of situations to take those assessments and use them to find out where people are weak and say, okay, you stutter, so you're probably going to have to speak to Pharaoh. You have a problem.
Moses would not have pulled the DISC assessment for leading Israel and being their mouthpiece. Let's just be real.
Mm-hmm.
Did we just eisegete that?
A little bit.
So it's that's my biggest thing is that in our weakness is where he's made strong. And to me that's another part of it that gets me is that we're weak, and our weaknesses being exposed is a good thing. And we want to hide our weaknesses. So when we take these assessments and they plug us into where we're strong, that means that we get to continue in our strength and never be exposed in our weakness.
Which I think it matters the season, right? So this is one thing, I put some dangers on here. And one of the dangers about your gifting revealing your destiny, which is quoted.
Oh my gosh.
From there, but
we worship destiny and not Jesus.
Well, okay. So so one of the dangers is that if you take these inventories, which I really don't like using for everybody, and if you just are passing these out and this is how you're supposed to get somewhere, well, what about the times when God is like, he starts you with one path and then he right turns you here and left turns you there and then heads you in this focus, and then it's almost like changing a major in college, right? Maybe you were supposed to wiggle around to get to where you're going.
It's like a lot of what we used in the church that I was a part of was Enneagram, right? Which is it's very accurate in a lot of ways. There's also people who probably turn us off with that because they think it's demonic, but it's accurate in a lot of ways. It's like a leadership or personality type inventory. Mm-hmm. But Myers-Briggs, all of mine have changed.
Yeah.
And they've changed because as I've dealt with my trauma and I've got healthy, I no longer present as a 3 because I was an Enneagram 3. I'm going to compete with you on everything, right? And years before that, I started out as a 1. And when I married my wife and I first started in ministry, I was a 1. I have to be perfect all the time. Why? Because I grew up with an abusive dad, and if I wasn't perfect, I got yelled at, I got beat, right? Now, then I moved to a 3. I can compete. I've got to stand out. There's something special about me, but I've got to earn this praise. I've got it right. Now, I don't present really as either of those. I present more as, I think I present more as like a 6 because I'm not going to compete with you, right? So we change versus getting these and saying, this is my, this is who I am and where I'm going to serve for the rest of my life.
And then we anchor ourselves to that. So, I mean, even in the disc in college, I would have said, oh, I'm going to answer all these questions extrovert because I thought I was. And maybe I was. And then a lot of shame happened and I became not so much an extrovert. I don't know what the reason is why I went from feeling like an extrovert to like not feeling like an introvert. Maybe motherhood, maybe I'm just exhausted of being an extrovert and I need my introvert time. I don't know, but we tend to take those assessments, whether it's in this church context or any context, but we tend to take these assessments as law and like, that's who I am. And then we build our identity. Yeah. And we build our identity around it. And then we use it to make choices in life instead of, God, who do you say I am, and where do you want me to go? Where do you want to? What ministry would you like me serving in?
The parking lot.
That's where most entrepreneurs get put. The parking lot. It makes no sense.
And
it makes a lot of sense. Get them outside where they can't talk to anybody.
If you've gotten so big that people can't park without professional help,
oh my God,
there's a problem. Okay,
Yep.
Just we know how to park. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't need professional help parking anywhere else I'm going in life unless they're over capacity. So it's telling us something about our capacity.
Well, and that's another thing. If we see people with attendance on parking lots, we'd turn around.
I just wave as I drove by.
See you later. I'm not coming to this church. This is weird. But yeah, so we've got to be careful not to base our identity, and I think that's a danger, not the purpose of this. Yeah. That's not their intention. It is a danger. But it's a danger because we're putting so much emphasis on these. Yeah. And it even says at the very end, it says, we believe everyone has, this is at the very end, you've done it all. We believe everyone has a next step in growing closer in their relationship with Jesus. Joining the church, okay, I'll buy that. Next step in growing is joining a local body. Okay, that's fine. I won't beat that up. And it says, you now, because of this, have the tools you need. Tools I need? You mean this was the tools I need to take your next steps on your journey to know God, find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference. And I'm pretty sure that even though, and those 4 things are triggers for me, trigger warnings, because that's part of this ARC system. But this had nothing to do with me getting to know God better, me finding freedom, discover your purpose. They're saying that, but they're saying that I discovered my purpose through man-made assessments, and that I need to pigeonhole myself in those.
And even the spiritual gifts assessment, my spiritual gifts are not the same as they were when I was a student or a young adult.
Right. And you can't find out what your spiritual gifts are by an assessment. I mean, that might help guide you, but the Lord is the one that's going to do that.
And it's people calling it out in you when they see you do something and go, whoa, you just came alive in that, right? That takes time.
Right. I hated kids. Okay, when I was like thinking of having a baby, they'd put a baby on a screen at church and go, look at the baby. And I'd be like, whoa. Because people that know, they know. And so I'm like, there's no way. And then the first, so we're charismatic. The first prophetic word that I ever received, it was new. This prophetic thing was new to me. And the first word I ever received was about leading children out. And I had just been married. I wasn't pregnant and still thought babies were quite ugly. And I was like, are you kidding me? You've got to be kidding, because I knew it was true. Because God does weird things like that, right? He takes us, he's like, oh, but maybe Satan was trying to destroy my calling and convince me otherwise.
I think all charismatics have had a prophetic word where they wanted to say, you take that back right now.
Right, yep. So I knew it was real because that's just the way it works sometimes. But if I had taken based that on these assessments, I would not be working in kids ministry. And that is truly, now that I've had 4 children, 4 wonderful children, and now I've realized that is my calling. Absolutely. It is to protect this next generation. And I can't get into that because then I'll get real crazy. But
Well, I used
this
to
would
be
have never
on,
told me that.
on the Myers-Briggs, which I think is a really good personality assessment. And when churches use Growth Track, some of them use DISC, some of them use the Enneagram, some of them use Myers-Briggs, right? All of those. I was an ENTJ for a really long time, and the joke that I would make is ENTJs are a jerk. There's less than 3% of the population are us, and we're either Napoleon or Hitler. So I'm a jerk. This is who I am.
Yeah.
I'm not even an ENTJ anymore when I take that assessment, because I don't judge and trust my intellect as much as I did. I ask a lot more questions. I don't like the black and white of what's wrong and what's right, because I've lived enough and been humbled enough to go, it's usually not as black and white as I want it to be, right? And as those things change, it's good for them to change. But if they were tied to us discovering our purpose, well, then that's going to be hard for us to feel like we change. Well, no, am I running away from my purpose? So,
Right.
Also, I'll just say this. I took the DISC. I took spiritual gifts inventories. I did that right after I was saved. I did that, when I was a student, did all that. It didn't help me know God better. It helped me know myself better. Okay. It didn't help me find freedom. It actually, in a lot of ways, made me feel like I had to live up to what this assessment said. And it didn't help me discover my purpose at all. I was still as confused as ever. It did help me make a difference, because it helped me figure out places where I could go ahead and serve and try things out. So that was good.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know about all those either. One of the things, and they've got a whole part here where they tell you, Abby, about the church story, which is involved in like all of these. One of the things that I noted, though, because they have scriptures for everything throughout this book, which I appreciate, I noted, let me see, I'm trying to look. I found 5 different versions of scripture that were used
I saw
throughout
that.
the book consistently, and that's a huge red flag for me. And I'm going to throw this out there, for you guys. Is it always a bad thing? No. But if you're going to a church where they're consistently preaching and using different versions of scripture throughout the message, they're doing it in books like this, the only reason for consistently switching versions of the Bible is to use whatever version fits to be kind of a proof text for what I'm trying to say, okay? So like I preach out of one version of the Bible. That is what I use, and when I use a different translation, I say, I want to use this translation for this reason. I think it captures the Greek really well. I think it, right? And that is rare. So that is, as they use scripture all throughout this to show everything we're saying is biblical, one, they use a lot of different translations. Like it is bad. It's constantly changing. And two, you got some of these scriptures that I don't know if you guys noticed, but they're cut up. It's like, let's start it halfway through. Scriptures that were taken out of context, like that's not the context that they were written in. So all of that was a bit of a red flag for me as well. I don't know if it was for you guys, but something I wanted to point out.
It takes me back to the garden where Eve was tempted by the twisting of Scripture. And when you can switch scriptures like that and switch versions, that's a huge red flag, because to me that's demonic. I'll just say it. It's demonic. The only people that I've ever seen in personal conversation that could quote the Bible and come at you that hard and then switch versions and twist scripture were demonic. And
Puppy doesn't like that demonic stuff.
Rocket agrees. You're over the target right there. No, but it's it's demonic doing that. And and I hate saying that about a church system. Like I don't say that lightly. Like I'll say other things jokingly or whatever, but there's no other way around that scriptural manipulation is demonic, because every time in Scripture that we see Scripture being manipulated, it's coming straight from the mouth of Satan. And that's what we see. And so maybe it's a little anecdotal, but I can say that from the biblical examples I have, I definitely don't like it. And it feels very demonic. And backtracking a little bit too, and you hit on it, but this isn't about knowing God. It spends more time on me helping me know myself
and the system and where I fit in it.
So where is God in this? Is
He's in the constantly switching versions of Scripture used to prove that's what you're doing.
But really, is this lifting me up to be God, or is it lifting the system up to be God? Because if I'm supposed to be knowing God through this, and all I'm knowing is more about myself, so they're elevating my sense of godliness in myself, which is self-righteousness. So they're elevating my self-righteousness, and then they're elevating the church, institution of the church, not the to exploit my own sense of being a god, a little g.
Well,
And
they're lifting up. I would say it probably a little differently. I think they're lifting up what you can do for God through their system, right? But again, our purpose is not what we can do for God. It's knowing God and what He does for us. We can't do anything. So I think, again, there's a lot of good to it, but when you look at it, what's being lifted up most is knowing myself better and where I fit in the system. It's not how to get to know God better. It's not how to be discipled. It's not how to know Scripture. I want to look at this because it actually says on page 11, here's our prayer for you. This whole growth track, here's our prayer for you. It says the phrase, our spiritual journey consists of 4 steps. Not your experience at Highlands, not part of your spiritual journey. All of our spiritual journey consists of 4 steps. Know God. And then they use 2 translations of Scripture to explain it. Find freedom. Discover purpose, and make a difference. Now, if all of our, first of all, I think condensing all of our spiritual journey into just a few things should never be done unless Jesus did it. Jesus did it. Yep. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you go back to the Didache, if you're not familiar, it's a first century or early second century document that basically explains how the church worked at that point. And there were already things that had been added beyond the apostles, but it's often called the teachings of the apostles. And the church was very simple, right? And part of what they talked about was they said the spiritual journey, here's what it consists of. You love God, you love people, and you obey the golden rule. And then they broke it down. What does that look like to do that? It looks like the Sermon on the Mount, and started breaking that down. So if we're going to make it overly simple, we need to do that with Scripture, I think. I think this simplifies the spiritual journey into something that Jesus never said it was. So I think, again, it cheapens the gospel. Is knowing God good? Yes. Is finding freedom good? Yep. Yes. Is discovering my purpose and making a difference, is it good? Yes. Is it actually my spiritual journey? Is it all that my spiritual journey consists of? And I'm trying to move the camera because the dog's moving the camera. I don't think that's all my spiritual journey consists of. And I think that's a big bait and switch, the way that they're doing that. Beyond that, okay, at the end of this, it says we help people use their gifts and fulfill step 4 of your whole spiritual journey, leads up to making a difference. Well, how do we do that? By helping you join the dream team. And we don't just call it a serve team, and we talked about this before, but by using the dream team language, and people always think I'm being too hard on this, our whole spiritual journey consists of these 4 things, and the final pinnacle step, how do you live that out? You join the dream team. That's very different than the Didache in the early church going, hey, our whole spiritual journey consists of loving God, loving people, and treating people the way you want to be treated. And how do we flesh that out? The Sermon on the Mount and living the way that Jesus taught us to. And we go toward the way of the light, and we go away from the way of darkness, and they explain that. That is very different than our whole spiritual journey consists of knowing God, finding freedom, pursuing your purpose, knowing your purpose, and making a difference. And by the way, the whole pinnacle, how do we do that? It's not the Sermon on the Mount. It's join the dream team, right? There is manipulation in that, and that looks very different from what the spiritual journey Scripture tells me it's supposed to look like. It looks very different from how early Christians talked about the whole spiritual journey. So again, I think they're using this assimilation system, and instead of calling it an assimilation system, they're saying, here's what your whole spiritual journey is about. Yeah. So when I say, and I say often, these churches that run systems like this, and a lot of times they're larger churches, not always, but they basically teach you that being a fully devoted follower of Jesus is actually, it comes down to just those few things. It comes down to serving. It comes down to giving. It comes down to joining a small group. A lot of people push back and they go, no, that's not what they're teaching. They're saying those are good things, and they are good things. Of course, that's not all it looks like to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus. And then you read that. Our spiritual journey consists of 4 steps. No, you very clearly just condensed all of our spiritual journey in following Christ into 4 simple steps. And not only that,
which they have very distinct definitions on what each 4 of those things mean and how to attain them.
Now, and they're all systemic. They're all a part of the narcissistic system that grows the church, okay? Which is it bad to grow the church? No, but we should never grow the church building and organization over the church, the people of the ecclesia.
Right.
The Scripture says that God added to their numbers, that the Father added to their numbers daily. It didn't say, and they added to their numbers.
They didn't assimilate people through the system daily.
They didn't, yeah. And daily they were assimilated into the image of the system.
Hey Disruptors, my name's Leanne Reese, one of the hosts of the Church Disrupted podcast. If you have enjoyed what we're doing here on the podcast, we'd love for you to partner with us financially so that we can continue to help those who are healing, find community, and combat spiritual abuse. Whatever you can give, we are so grateful for your support.
So I want you to think about this too, though. Okay. I want you to think about those 4 steps, right? Know God, find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference. Thousands, and I'm not kidding, thousands of churches will tell you that's their mission. That's what God created them for. That's why they exist as a church, is to help people know God, to help people find freedom, to help people discover purpose, to help people make a difference. This system is used by so many churches. You probably know of a church in your area that this is their mission statement, or at least 2 or 3 of these are their mission statement, and they tack one on. And we have all these churches that are in a mold that say, God put us right here in our community to do something special, when the reality is, no, we're just plagiarizing the mission God gave us. We didn't hear one from God, so we had to get it from somebody else. That bothers me.
And that's what you just hit. What I was thinking is, when I see that, what it tells me, and people are going to disagree with this, but what it tells me is that they're too busy listening to man and to Church of the Highlands, and not busy enough listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
You know, and that's exactly what I hear, because it's like, oh, I'm listening to this training manual when he gave us the Bible. That's what we should be in, you know.
If a bunch of churches are going to have the same mission statement, it should be love God, love people, you know, and then something else from Scripture. I love those. So I don't have a problem with churches.
I see those a lot now.
I don't have a problem with churches using the same mission statements, right? But when you're using this kind of mission statement, and do I think it's bad? Do I think it's evil? No, I think it's lazy, right? But what it tells me is, you didn't plant this church because God gave you a vision for your community, because otherwise you'd be able to tell us what it is. You planted this church because you thought it would be a good idea, and then you went and found the best system to do it, period.
Yeah.
And we don't need more church planners who think it would be a good idea.
Right.
We need church planners who are absolutely called. Like, they have a heart for a city, for a place. But instead, a lot of these churches, and I'm not saying all, a lot of the churches that are going to use Growth Track, and they're going to have this kind of mission. Hey, we're here to help people know God, find freedom, discover purpose, make a difference, right? They're going to cities that already have hundreds of churches that aren't full. And what they're not saying when they come in, they're not saying, we believe God is calling us here to reach an unreached people. They're not saying, we believe God is calling us to come here and do something different than everybody else. They'll normally say something like this: we believe that God called us to plant a life-giving church in this area. And all that means is we think our way of doing church is better. Right? We think these other churches aren't doing a good enough job, so we'll come in and do it. And these are a lot of the same churches. I'm not trying to pigeonhole. It's not all. But many times these churches, as they grow, they're the ones that go to other churches and say, hey, could we buy your building and close you down and y'all just send your people to us? Right now, I've got a friend. I got a friend who's in another state. They're a very large church, very successful church. And they have a church that's more large, more successful, that runs these systems, that literally planted a campus, moved into the high school that touches their property. And they have been asking them, can we take care of that note? Can we help you with anything? Do you have any balloon payments coming up? They're already trying to buy the building and close that church down that is very successful and large, because they want to be in that community, because there's big tithers in that community. They don't care about closing down another church. Now, is that every church that uses the system? Absolutely not. Right. But it's one of the things that comes from this system, because if you're planting a church without a unique vision, right? If you're planting a church that is just saying, hey, I think it would be cool to plant a church and let me do it this way because I know it works, we run the risk of using people because it's a thing we're doing instead of a thing we're called to. Something you're called to is usually something you don't want to do that you have to do. You want to know what I don't want to do? I don't want to run SAI. I don't want to do this. I don't want to work multiple part-time jobs every week and leave a business that was very successful because I don't have time to run this and get this thing started and make a difference in this way. I don't want to do this. That is not easy, okay? I don't want to do the things that I'm having to do to make all this work. I don't want to have to ask people for money. I don't want to have to constantly go toe-to-toe with churches who, honestly, wouldn't do a thing for me and would rather I just disappeared. I don't want to constantly have threats of lawsuits. I don't want to do any of that. I do it because I'm called.
That's right.
I can't not do it in this season. So I hope that you're hearing this. It's the last thing I want to do. But I'm doing it because I'm called. That's what calling is. You can't not do it.
So I think that for me, as a former attempted church planter, that when you talk to church planters, what church planters will tell you most of the time, and what is it, 99% fail? It's ridiculous how many church plants fail. And most of them will
that's why they use this system, because most church plants don't fail.
So they, and a lot of them will fail before they get off the ground. But what you hear from the church planters is when they look back at it 3-4 years down the road, they say, the work God was doing was in me. And so, but it tells me that we have been so imprinted, so discipled to the institutional church system that someone that's entrepreneurial thinks that the only way that they can serve God is by planting a church.
You should probably be starting a business.
You should probably be starting a business.
Being Jesus in that business.
And that's the truth. It's like the only way that, even in my experience, the only way I felt like I could truly serve God for, completely was by planting a church. So we tried to plant a church. And I look at these church plants and I'm like, what it shows me is that people are being discipled to the institution of church, and they're not being discipled to Jesus.
That's right.
And that's why we see so many church plants. So you have the entrepreneurial spirit with disciples of the institution, and what that equals is a bunch of church plants and a bunch of people that are going to fail. But the good part is that when they fail, the people that go through this, and I'm speaking of myself, come out a lot closer to Christ, transformed to the image of Christ, willing to say things about the systems that they weren't willing to say before, because when they realized they were failed by the system and all you have left is Jesus, it's a rude awakening.
Well, and it also let you know, it gave you freedom that your purpose in following God didn't have to be as a professional Christian. And I would actually challenge you're making a much bigger difference as a business owner trying to represent Jesus in your community than you would have been as a pastor.
I'm a Christian that's a professional, not a professional Christian. And that's...
Paul wasn't a professional Christian.
No, he wasn't.
He was a professional tent maker who planted churches and made tents everywhere he went.
I didn't know people back then enjoyed camping so much. Anyway, but no, that's exactly right. It's exactly right. And so just for me, it shows the failure of disciple making. And so, and like you said, the ARC churches don't fail at the same rate. Not yet. Not yet, because...
Let me throw this out there. ARC churches don't fail at the same rate. There's a reason why the system's used. ARC churches tend to survive and thrive longer. Okay, we're doing some research into this, so I'm telling you what I've seen. This is my personal what I've seen. We're doing research to actually put some data to it, and I could be totally wrong. Okay, but it seems like from what I've seen, ARC churches, when they do fail, it's more moral failure type issues. Okay, but not. If we say a church not failing, is it still a 501c3 functioning organization is the mark, they're doing a great job. If we say the people who have been through ministry there are all left better, or for the majority are left better, and there's not a line of hurting people, they're not doing a good job, because there is a line of hurting and broken people behind a lot of these churches. And I don't think they meant it. I don't think they did it on purpose, but this system chews people up and spits them out. It uses you and it discards you. And people can say, Jeff, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about all you want. I've been in the system. I've chewed people up and discarded them and been applauded for it. Okay, so don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe you should actually listen to what some of these people are saying behind closed doors. These systems chew people up and spit them out and discard them, even when we don't mean to do it, guys. Your intention doesn't have to be bad, Pastor, but if the result is bad, we have to look at it, okay? So I would say, yes, ARC churches, people are using this model. They're using this growth track system because it works to build a 501c3 organization and bring money in and line people's pockets. It gets people in the building. But when I look at the people who have been hurt by it, when I look at how many scandals and abuse situations had these systems as a part of it, then I would say no. They're absolutely failing because they think they're thriving and growing while failing the people.
Yes, because you get what you measure. That's a business motto there. You get what you measure. And you know what? It's really difficult to measure transformation.
It's really easy to measure baptisms.
It's really easy to measure baptisms.
So here's a real measurement. When I was leading a staff, if we didn't have a certain number of baptisms every quarter, every year, then one, if it was too low, we got fired. And if it was not high enough, nobody got a raise. So guess what? You're no longer worried about helping people get baptized because they made a decision for Jesus. You're trying to get people to be baptized because you don't want to lose your job.
So it's easy to measure the number of people that signed the pledge in this. It's easy to measure giving, but you know what you have to do to measure transformation?
Know people.
You have to know people.
You have to get in the mess.
You have to get in the mess.
What does Scripture say? Without oxen, the stable stays clean. No poop, no progress.
And so that's the thing. I know very few pastors of churches of any significant size that know very many people, very many of their congregants.
No, we want the ministry today without the mess. And there is no ministry without the mess because people are messy.
And this is designed...
Transformation's messy.
That's what this is designed to do. It's designed to sanitize the mess by the time it gets to the lead preacher.
Well, and unfortunately, our whole society is this way. So you have, when your ministry is maybe messy, then you're going to get a lot of consumers.
That's right.
Who are going to complain about the messiness and are going to complain about, that your ministry, they don't seem like they're really taking charge. Are you sure that's the right person to lead that ministry? And so there's a lot of problems.
Ministry is not something you lead because ministry is not a program. Ministry is something it's not even something you do. Minister is something you are. Minister in Scripture. Do you know what the word means? Servant. That's it. Minister is something you are.
The original, was it the deacons or overseers were actually the ones that were designated to pass out the food?
The deacons.
The deacons, yeah. The deacons were the ones.
Which is another word for servant. Those two words, there's two separate words. One's translated as minister, one's translated as deacon most of the time, and they both mean servant.
Do they mean servant leader? Because that is something that is also written in here.
They mean servant shepherd.
Yeah. Now we're looking at things saying we need to say servant leader to make people feel better about being servants. And then the first will be last, the last will be first. And Jesus was a servant. So, but we do that and we manipulate it in our mind, like we take it to mean, oh, well, now I'm in leadership.
Let me just throw this out there, okay? And this is I've written books on leadership, okay? I get leadership. I'm pretty good at it. I've got companies that pay me to teach them leadership, okay? Leadership happens from the front. By definition, you are leading people. Jesus said, with my people, it's not going to be that way. You're not going to lord leadership over people. The first will be last, and the last will be first. He didn't call people to be leaders. He called them to be shepherds. Leadership is a gift. Some people have it, okay? But the people we call church leaders, they weren't called leaders. They were called elders and overseers. And you look, you lead from the front. By definition, you oversee from the back or from above.
Yep.
Okay? Elders, the ones that are last, the ones that don't look cool anymore, the ones that don't have, because that word elder is literally the same word that's translated old man a lot, okay? It's you're leading from the back. I'm behind, and I can give you advice, and I can call you out when you're wrong, but I'm not trying to do this for me. I'm trying to do this for you. Right. This idea of servant leadership, the Bible doesn't call us to servant leadership. The Bible calls us to shepherd. It calls us to have elders and overseers. The people who have the gift of leadership, yeah, they're good at getting people from the front. They're also not what we would consider church leaders, because that's not what the Bible describes with elders. Why does it say that an elder shouldn't be someone young in the faith? Because they're going to get shipwrecked. You might have a leader who's young in the faith, but that leader is going to be responsible to the elders. And again, elders and overseers, those two words were interchangeable in Scripture. You cannot oversee from the front. You oversee from the back or above.
Yep.
One of my favorite pastors used to say, you can't push a rope. And so leadership looks like walking it out, and people will follow when you walk it out. But so much of the time we have pastors trying to push a rope, and then it just creates a knotted up mess.
Yeah. So the end, one of the last pages in this whole booklet is the leadership honor code.
Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about the leadership.
Yeah. So
we're probably going to see this one different, but I have a problem.
Yeah, but in order to have this in the back of this document, I'm assuming that means, and based on a few pages before, that they're considering all these volunteers, all these now members, now volunteers. I'm calling them volunteers because that's what it is.
But they're dream teamers.
The dream team volunteers are they dream team volunteers or are they dream team leaders?
Oh, dream teamers are leaders.
Oh, they're leaders.
But they only do what we tell them in our system.
You have people competing because you're told you're going to be a leader. So they're competing to be the unpaid interns.
And they're
but think about this.
They're considered
about this
servant
language.
leaders.
Think about this language, though, right? I'm on the dream team. I'm a leader in the kingdom. All of that sounds good. I'm a leader in my church, right? It makes you want to do this. This sounds so great. And you get sucked into the system. And honestly, most new Christians never go, but wait, where am I getting discipled? Most Christians that are part of these churches go, but wait, where are they getting discipled? We're not asking that question. And when you do ask that question, you get the answer of small groups. And I'm going to go back up to this because I'm going to point this out. Know God, find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference. They actually say this. We know God through worship. And they're talking about the worship service. That is not how you know God.
No, it's not.
Okay. That we find freedom through small groups. Okay, so I have a lot of people that go, no, small groups is where you're discipled. Well, that's not even what they promise. They promise you're going to find freedom through them. The only small group I've ever found freedom through was freedom, but the freedom curriculum was also used to do a lot of manipulative things in the church as well. So there's good to it. I love the Bible study. I struggle with it being done in churches because of the things that happen, right? So small groups aren't for that either, right? And we discover purpose and make a difference by being on the dream team, right? Or we discover purpose through Growth Track, and we make a difference by being on the dream team. But they come down, they give you this leadership thing. And which page is that on? I'm trying to find it.
67, so probably
67.
70 something.
It is like way back
yeah,
there. Okay.
it's one of the last. It's one of the very last things after
So
the appendix.
a lot of churches have something like this, the leadership honor code. So basically, if you go through Growth Track and you join a team, and if you don't join the dream team, you're not fulfilling your purpose. You're not living out the spiritual journey, because that's what it looks like to live out the spiritual journey. We're not making this up. This is what was promised. This is what was told, right? As an essential part of the Highlands leadership family, which is so funny because I've got someone in our Discord right now that sent me a style guide from an art church, which we're going to go through at some point. A style guide literally told them how to dress and not dress, and how to layer clothing and look stylish and stuff like that. Anyway, but they said, I am this person is a professional at like what they do. They serve. I'm trying to be very careful not to say anything that will let them be tracked. They serve on a team because of what they do professionally. And when they make suggestions, they're basically told to be quiet and don't ask questions. They're not a leader. They're supposed to be a team leader, even of this team. They're not a leader, right? But what it does is it says as an essential part of the Highlands leadership family, you have a responsibility to exhibit mature Christ-like behavior. And I get that. So the leadership honor code should be, hey, if you're going to be upfront leading a ministry, act like Jesus told us to act. The Bible already has it in there. Let's do that. But instead, they say things like you can't have you got to read your Bible and pray and fast, which they don't check. Okay.
They don't check any of this stuff. There's no accountability.
But don't be profane, smoke or chew tobacco, gamble. Okay, so you're telling me I can't be a leader if I gamble on sports? Well, I gamble on sports. I don't do anything sinful with it, but I gamble on sports. So I think that's weird, right? You can't indulge in much wine or alcoholic beverages. What is much? But I get it. A lot of these things seem pretty good, right? But they also walk through this, and I'm trying to find exactly where it is. There's another piece of this where they talk about your commitment to the church. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? All right, so I'm trying to find it. And it goes along with this.
Probably after the appendix.
I don't think this one's after the appendix. I think it's pretty. It's earlier, but it goes with this, right? Some of the things they have in the leadership honor code are just so they can control you. It's open ended enough. It's kind of like all other on a job description, all other duties as assigned. Okay.
Well, it sounds like a way to fire you.
Yes.
Right. Like, oh well, I bet that person was engaged.
While
in
you're looking for that, this one jumped out at me: dishonest gain. So whoever wrote this and promotes this, whoever wrote this and promotes this just disqualified themselves from leadership, because we see dishonesty throughout it. Like they're going through this.
Dishonesty doesn't mean lying; it means twisting, and there's a lot of twisting.
So, what's his name? Chris Hodges. Chris Hodges, you just disqualified yourself in your own.
I don't know if Chris Hodges wrote Growth Track.
But he teaches it and he promotes it. So
here's their becoming member. Here's their membership covenant, which you have to sign first, okay? The first thing is I'll protect the unity of my church, which sounds great. The Bible talks a lot about unity, right? But then it says, how do I do that? I refuse to gossip and I follow my leaders, which means that if I question my leaders, I'm hurting the unity of the church. And what they do is now I can't question my leaders.
Right.
They tell us what their governance structure is in this, which I appreciate. That's very good. But their governance structure is the staff are part of the elders, and then they have overseers from other churches that love their church and love their pastor. So they love the church, love the pastor, and are protecting the church is what the book says. So you're going to be held accountable by the people at your church. But if they do that, you're going to accuse them of gossip, or you're going to accuse them of not following their leaders. That's often how these are used. I'm not saying that's how Church of the Highlands is trying to use them, but that's often how I see these used and manipulated. It also says I'll share the responsibility of my church by inviting the unchurched to attend and warmly welcoming those who visit. It doesn't say I'm going to share the responsibility of my church by having a vote and a say. It doesn't say I'm going to share responsibility in my church by helping disciple people in our gathering. It doesn't talk about anything you do other than inviting people to come and welcoming those who come. Because again, this system's about growing the church. And then the last thing, I will serve the ministry of my church by using my God-given gifts to make a difference in the lives of others, which means joining the dream team. That membership covenant looks to be, my opinion, based on how I've seen these things used in so many spiritual abuse cases, things like this are often used to control people. Number one that they sign is used to shut them up if they have a problem or a concern. Okay. Number two is to basically say, hey, you're not pulling your weight if more people aren't coming because of you. Okay. And number three is, hey, again, you've got to give, you got to do all these things, you got to be involved in serving. And it tells you that you got to give. That was another red flag for me. They actually talk about 3 levels of giving. Did you guys notice that? Talking about their church finances, they talk about the tithe and that everybody has to tithe and that it's money, which, if you want to check that out, we got another video on that. The biblical tithe was never money and it was never mandated for the church. The church was called to be generous, not tithe. So the first thing is we're being legalistic and manipulating people through the tithe. But the second thing they say is an offering is giving over and above the tithe. An offering is actually just free will. It's I give as the Lord leads me, which even going back to the historical didache, it was, yes, we give first fruits. That's not a tithe, but it says you give first fruits as you feel led, as you see fit, right? So offerings are not above the tithe. Offerings are what we give in the church instead of the tithe, but now they've created a level. Tithing is what you have to do, and then offering are what people do above the tithe. And then if you have the gift of giving, you join Kingdom Builders, you join our legacy team, and you give even more. They've created a ladder of giving where you can never give enough. And where tithing and 10% of your income, that's just the bottom level of where you start, and you have to do that to be a member or to join our teams. I have a problem with that because, again, it's a ladder of giving, and it's a ladder the Bible doesn't teach. The Bible doesn't teach that offerings are above and beyond the tithe. The Bible doesn't teach that tithing is compulsory for the New Testament church, and the Bible never teaches that tithing was money. Okay, and the gift of giving, the Bible doesn't teach that there are people who are going to join a team and their whole serving is paying off your church's debt, and they call it Kingdom Builders. No, most of the giving that was done, none of the giving that was done went to church programs. It went to people in need, and the only people it went to. So the only giving, when you look back at the Didache, the only giving that went outside of widows and orphans and people in need and like relief offerings was for the prophets and teachers who literally gave their whole life to the church. And most of that was not money. It was just the first fruits of everything as you feel led so that they can do this, right? And that's why it constantly also tells you that if a prophet asks for money, if an apostle asks for money, they're a false prophet. They should never ask you for money. That's going back to the Didache, which was explaining how the church operated in the early 2nd century, right? Which, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, and I'm not saying it should be scripture, but the Didache was considered a part of most canons of scripture up until right before the New Testament was finally canonized by the Catholic Church. Many traditions had it as a part, and it just missed the cut, and we don't talk about it anymore, right? So that was another one for me. Are there any other things that y'all see that y'all want to talk about before we finish up? Because I know we're coming to the end of our time. That just were bothersome about that, and I'm so sorry I got that upset over the giving. I just think we hurt people by stealing from people who don't have anything to give. Single moms, like it drives me crazy.
Another this could be a whole episode, and this is something that makes me want to walk out when I just hear this, because I've heard it recently in my own personal stuff. But so under Join the Dream Team, I believe it's probably core value number 3. I only had the one with the blanks, so I had to just kind of fall back to my memories. Yeah. I believe it says we pursue, and then based on the verse below, excellence. And so one of the big things, in my opinion, that I hear from a lot of these type of churches and churches that are just, I don't know, this type of church, is that things need to be done in excellence. And so we don't do them, we don't even try unless they can be done excellently from the beginning. And you could take out their definition of excellence there and put perfection. Yep. So they're expecting perfection from the gate by man's definition. Oh, yeah. And then not only that, but we pursue it. So if you're on the dream team, if you want to be a volunteer of this church, you better be good at what you do. And you better not have any failings or any weaknesses or any shortcomings. And gosh, never step out in faith and do something because it's probably going to bomb, and we don't want
Scripture.
that.
Think about Scripture. Go back and look at the original 12 apostles. Mm-hmm. The only one of them, the only ones that were kind of excellent at what they did was Matthew was an excellent tax collector, which meant an excellent sinner, and Judas was pretty excellent. Yeah. Peter, James, and John, every time we see them, both before their call and after the crucifixion, they weren't even good at catching fish, guys. Mm-hmm. Every time Jesus comes up on them, he's like, hey, you should try again. They're like, we're not very good. We're not catching anything. You should try again. Oh my gosh, we caught all the fish, right? We disqualify people over things like excellence. Mm-hmm. And we would have never had the church. What did Paul say, right? And we talk so much, which this is a whole other podcast episode. It's going back to the history. Like, we think that the sermon in Protestantism, not in Catholicism or Orthodox, okay? In Catholicism, Orthodox, Anglican, and all of those, the Eucharist, communion, is the pinnacle of the service. The pinnacle of the service in Protestantism is the sermon. Mm-hmm. We don't even realize that we stole sermons from the Greeks. We saw people who you paid to give you a sermon, those were sophists. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. We stole that from the Greeks. When we read about sermons in Scripture, those are all in the man-made headings. Wow. There were no sermons. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a word used for that. There's a word for preaching, which just meant to speak. And what did Paul say? Paul said, I don't come like these sophists. I don't come like these Greeks. I don't come with eloquence of phrase. I preach with power and truth. And Paul was so unexcellent at preaching that a kid literally fell out the window in one of the house meetings where he was preaching and died because he fell asleep. Okay? So Paul talked about it. He wouldn't have been considered excellent at preaching, and somebody would have told him, we don't think we see the preaching gift in you, Paul, most likely. Yep. So we disqualify people today over pursuing excellence that Jesus would have never disqualified. But also, even though Paul wasn't an excellent preacher, how did he plant all these churches? By going and preaching the gospel. And what again, it may not have been excellence as far as a performance, but it was excellent in its results. And we too often look at the performance instead of the results.
In the charismatic vernacular, we would say that it's performance versus anointing. We want to seek people that have an anointing more than we seek people that perform well. And a lot of times we equate anointing with performance, but anointing is more, how does the Spirit flow through what you're saying? That's right. And so thinking about Paul, maybe not a gifted orator, but Paul was gifted in loving people, in ministering to people and serving people, because he served and he worked alongside people. We know that as well. Like he made tents alongside other people, and that's how he met a lot of people. So he was very gifted in his approach and anointed in his approach and in his ability to have intercourse with people, to have discussions with people, and
discourse,
discourse,
not intercourse.
That's not the right word.
Discourse would be talking. Intercourse is something different.
You can cut that.
I don't think Paul was having. He was celibate, from what I understand.
Yeah, well, you can cut that part. But anyway, so Paul was very
discoursey.
I just lost.
Very good at talking to people.
Very good in his discourse. Anyway, I think he probably had a better grasp of vocabulary than I do as well.
Probably.
So anyway.
All right, well, guys, I thank you so much for being here today. I know we've been here a little longer than even we planned on it, but this is a good conversation. A lot of people ask us questions about ARC systems, about Growth Track. Some people want to know more about the red flags. Some people want to share red flags they've seen with us. Others think we're just being too hard. And I hope you hear this, because we're just going to kind of land the plane here. It's a bit of a jolting land because, we could keep going on this. Mm-hmm. All of this is not bad. And I really appreciate how transparent Highlands is about their governance structure and things like that. I disagree with it, but I'm glad that they talk about it, right? There's a lot of good here. The whole system, I don't think, needs to be thrown away. The system needs to be reformed, and systems will always need to be reformed, because systems, again, they're magnetized toward efficiency, not toward transformation, not toward discipleship, okay? But this is some of the reasons why, and you may disagree. That's okay. This is some of the reasons why, though, that we see these are big red flags we see in the system, which is why when I see a church using growth track or having a mission about finding freedom, knowing God, discovering purpose, they're huge red flags for me. Okay. And not only these reasons, but because of how often I have seen them be misused in church scandals, in, church abuse situations. So again, if you're a pastor and you're listening to this and you go, Jeff, I think you guys are being way too hard on this. I think you're totally wrong. Instead of spouting off on social media and just trying to make us look silly, let's have a conversation about how we can reform the system to be at its best, to not be manipulative, and to help make disciples. Okay? We are all products. If you are a Protestant, you are products of a reformation of a system. It was the Reformation, not of the church. It was the Reformation of the Catholic system. That's why it still looks so institutionalized, right? We need to reform it. So join us in these conversations about how we can do this. Instead of being so defensive, would you ask questions and say, you know what? Could that actually hit people that way? Could people understand it that way? Could that do damage? Okay. Maybe we are overreacting in some ways. I don't know. But I would rather lean toward accidentally overreacting to protect people than underreacting to protect the system.
Yeah.
Or a system. So anyway, as we get ready to head out on this one, is there anything else that you want to say or anything you want to leave the listeners with that we haven't talked about?
I would just encourage anyone that has a church or that is a leader implementing growth track to take a hard look at, is discipleship happening as well? And not to let this be, oh, well, we're doing discipleship, come to growth track, but to really separate the two and to really reconsider how these systems are being used.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, not call small groups based on the way it's normally done in the system discipleship either, because that's not. It's community, which is really good, but it's not the same as discipleship. Buck, anything you want to share?
It's people over policies. And I think that's the big thing is that which systems are, structured policies. And so people over policies. Jesus died for the people, not for our policies, not for our systems. And, systems are good. Policies are good. They're necessary even. But when people argue for the system and care more about the system than they do about the people, that's where there's a problem. And, and I'm sure that these systems have produced some discipleship. But it's not biblical discipleship. And I'm sure you can argue both sides of it, but it's not the biblical model. It doesn't even, I don't think it even vaguely resemble the biblical model that we're given. And so, I think at the end of the day, it is about people. And the clergy and pastors are people as well. And I think a lot of times these systems are put in place to protect the pastors because pastors are overworked, abused, they're hurt. Hurting people hurt people. Yeah. And so a lot of these systems are there to protect the pastors and to help the pastors. And let's not neglect that because, I call the system demonic, but it doesn't mean that I think that...
Doesn't mean the people who are running it are demonic.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the people who are running it are demonic. And, and I speak hyperbolically anyway, but it's... One of the biggest problems I see in the church is pastors have been hurt so much that they won't let people love them. And because they won't receive love from people, they don't have the community. They don't have other people around them because their expectation is to be hurt. And so they build walls around themselves that were never intended to be built. And therefore, they're not receiving love because we were designed to receive love vertically from the Father, and we're designed to receive love horizontally from the people we're in community with. And so to me, this is just a symptom of the dichotomous nature of the church. And it's a proliferation of it that it just continues to divide the church between people and from the laity and the clergy.
Well, and that's one of the biggest issues when I push against the institution and that not being a part of the early church. The reason why, and the stats are wild at how often pastors are burning out and depressed and everything else. But the reason why is what we call a pastor today is not biblical. They're carrying way too much on their shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff that the church as a whole was supposed to do. So the answer is not more systems. The answer, I believe, from my opinion, is actually to begin deconstructing some of the systems that we built that God never told us to build, because we got to take pressure off of the professional Christians, because they're carrying pressure that they weren't supposed to carry. Now, I will say this before we finish out, and then we'll finish out on this, but I think this is good news. I did have, and this is not like a high-ranking official, so I don't know how much I can, believe this, but I did have a person who reached out after we had the last videos about this, and they're a pastor at Highlands. They went through Highlands College, and they just said, hey, I agree with some of this. I don't think it's as bad as you think, but this is why. And he said apparently that Chris Hodges has been talking to the staff and that they're redesigning Growth Track because they've seen some of the problems of it being over-systematized. So if that is the truth, and I pray it's the truth, if that's the truth, bravo, okay? We're talking about the system as we know it. I've seen nothing but that Instagram DM to tell me that it's being changed. I've only seen the damage this church has done, or this system has done inside of churches. But if they are seeing that it's over-systematized and changing it, bravo. I can't say anything about the new system until I see what it actually is, because it could be more spiritual, less systematic, and still manipulative. But I pray it's not, and I pray that they're waking up to that. But again, as pastors, we love you. We want to help you. If you feel overwhelmed, we do want to help you. Reach out. We'll talk about ways to help. But let's not look for salvation and rest in a system that is good, because it's going to end up just using people. We got to look for it and say, what has God truly called me to do? And I believe if we would return to the church that Jesus set up, there would be Christians who get paid, but they wouldn't be professional Christians. And I believe that the elders and the prophets who did get paid would not be burnt out. They would be operating in freedom, right? Plus, man, it's the only way that we get rid of this performance mindset and all become a part of the body again, where we're all needed. Because right now, the way the institution's set up, we got a whole lot of mouths. We got a whole lot of mouths and a whole lot of hands and a whole lot of other people in the body who they're withered, they're crippled, and they don't move. So anyway, guys, I hope that this conversation has it challenged you. I hope it's made you curious. I hope it's blessed you in some way. But just know it's okay if we don't agree. Let's start deeper conversations about these things and about how we can bring good reform to especially the evangelical church. How can we keep the good things without throwing out the bad? How can we pursue Jesus and discipleship over systems without just getting rid of all systems, right? So if you have any questions, reach out and let us know. Love you guys. Grateful for y'all being on the podcast. And we're going to do some more of these soon. And we're going to have y'all on to dive into some of this church history stuff because it's fascinating. And I think you guys will definitely be a part of that. But we appreciate you guys for being on the podcast today. We appreciate you guys for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Church Disrupted podcast. Until then, grace and peace.